And Suzy, please.
Oh, sorry, I was muted, honey. Sorry, start again. Okay, it's good now, sweetie.
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Incidentally, I'd like to thank you for the donations that you have sent us. We appreciate them. I'd like to start out with a quote, which I think is so important right now because it has to do with the talk that we had last week. T.S. Eliot, a famous writer, he said, "We shall never cease from exploration, but at the end of all our exploring, we shall arrive at where we started. But then we know that place for the first time." And so this is what I want to cover, is that we'll explore a great deal. We go up and down, progress and regress, until we finally come to the place where we actually started from, which is the innocent, empty place inside us, which is always there, but we do not recognize. So what is important is that what we covered last week on thought and awareness is one of the most important secrets to heightening your awareness. Because everything that we suffer from and blocks us from that place, that treasure inside us, is all done by the mind, which is called ego, thought itself. And when we do not recognize the difference between thought and awareness, then of course the thought takes precedence. And not only that, but we make it real. Well, the moment you make thought real, it can help it. This has been proven by many, and Course in Miracles makes it very clear, is that we begin to feel guilt. Now, guilt is not guilt because we have done something bad. Guilt is that feeling where we feel incomplete, feel as if something is missing. It's as if they have I call it like a pebble in your shoe and you don't know how to get rid of it. And so the talk is going to be based on learning how to deal with this feeling of guilt. The Course in Miracles says that how many? About 80% of the population or more suffer a sense of guilt because they don't know who they really are. But it is so subtle. It's a feeling of discomfort. Once we begin to know how we act between awareness and thought, once we know the difference between the two, that very difference will make the difference in our seeing and our being. For example, did you know that every thought you think you believe to be true? You believe to be real? We don't even question it. You get a morbid feeling, all of a sudden you feel morbid. So you have something do you want to talk about the guilt because you're
Yeah, the Course in Miracles says that the sense of guilt that we have, we're not actually guilty for what we think we're guilty for. For instance, if you have an addiction and you have continuing guilt feelings, the addiction is actually a cover. It's not the addiction that's causing the guilt. The guilt is the natural feeling when we feel separate from the oneness, when as the Course says, it basically says, if you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. It says that the ego is the part of mind that believes in division. And it says, how could a part of God detach itself without believing that it was attacking God or the whole? And so that sense of betrayal is what creates this underlying feeling of guilt. So we don't actually exist as separate individual people. We're one with God in the mind of God. And we had this idea of separation. And the moment we even think about it, what would it be like? The sense of guilt comes, like, why would I be? It's almost as if, say, with your parents, you're a little kid with your parents, and you might think, what would it be like if I had different parents? Mm-hmm. So you have this slight underlying feeling of betrayal all of a sudden. So there's this sense of guilt, but we're so afraid of this guilt because guilt is so negative. We don't want to know the real reason, so we cover it over in what we think of as a worldly act. And that's why we judge other people as well, because we want the guilt to be out there in the
That's
world.
right.
Because it's too painful.
Because
in
we
us.
feel separation all
We
the
feel
time from other,
separation.
right? Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we take everything personally that other people say about us, or anything that we feel or think, we make it real. And this is the biggest block. But once we know the difference between thought and the awareness of that thought, that very difference itself will make us see, oh, that was just a thought.
It's an extraordinary idea because the course talks
Yes.
about the ego, but the ego sometimes we for some people it's a little vague. Is that who I really am? Is that my personality? Is the ego my body? But in this case, we can actually look at our thoughts and we can realize instantly that there's a part of us, of what we are, that is the awareness of these thoughts.
That's right.
And that gives us
right.
a little breathing space.
And once we get more in touch with the awareness, we get back in touch with who we already are. It's not something we achieve, it's something we are. It's a very plain, well, we call it emptiness. Okay, that's the best way. You know, the very nature of being is empty. So sometimes we feel great joy for no apparent reason, or you feel so relaxed and so good. You know, those are moments when you are in that empty space, you see. But the moment a thought comes, any thought at all, okay, we make it real. And it is making that real that it becomes the problem. Because no thought is ever real. Wow, that's quite something to realize. Thought is what makes our world the way it is, how we feel about everything we see and touch and experience. Awareness is your true nature. It is your emptiness, it is your moment of being, peace, love. It is when you are with your children, you feel that sense of completion, that sense of moment of innocence, beautiful feeling. That feeling, that is the awareness in you, that is the emptiness in you. But the moment you connect with the world, you're always making, you know, right, wrong, should, shouldn't, you know. And that's the guilt.
That's the guilt.
That's the guilt, right?
That's sort of it's like a pushing guilt around, right and wrong. There's the guilt. It's not in me, it's there, or it's in this behavior.
It's a
here,
constant discomfort where you are conscious of yourself. You're not completely relaxed in being who you are, right?
So this recognition that you're the awareness of the thought. So even if you continue to have a thought, for instance, say I bump my knee and it hurts, and I say, oh, my knee's going to hurt all day, and I don't pay attention to that thought, and that put me into a bad mood, or I've now projected that into the future, as the course says. Being aware of it, we don't necessarily have to let the belief go. Just being aware of it is a bit of a relief to begin with, because we're now stronger than it.
And that's what you're saying, and that's exactly what I want to say. We bring awareness into everything. So if you're thinking and you say, oh my goodness, I'm thinking negative, so therefore I'm going to be negative. Yes, chances are you will. But if you are aware that these thoughts, you're aware that these thoughts are just thoughts, then you're not a victim.
Right.
Okay, and that is the difference. There is a question here, which was a very common one. Would you like to read it?
Sure, sweetie.
And answer it?
Yes.
Because it's a common one.
And this is from Burt's book, The Perfection of Awareness, which right now is only available in Kindle. We're looking for a new publisher. So if anybody out there knows of any publishers, we've got 5. We keep getting people asking for paperback copies and audio copies of Burt's books, but at this point in time, we no longer have a publisher. So if anybody could help us out with that or point us in the right direction. We tried self-publishing. It hasn't worked out that well for us. No. So, anyway, back to the book. Okay, there's a section in The Perfection of Awareness. It's called Question and Answers. And the first question in here is, it's okay to discuss facing fears and problems in a satsang place where one feels safe. But it is a different story when one is faced with a life-threatening situation. Why does it seem that way?
Well, when there is a life-threatening situation, your whole life is feeling threatened, you see? And the moment that happens, it's very hard to say, well, you know, this doesn't have much reality, this thought, etc., etc. You get caught immediately. Because again, what is the problem here? The problem here is this, that we make everything, quote, unhealthy, personal. And the moment you make anything personal, that immediately will take you apart from the rest. You say, okay, let's go back to the real truth. What is the real truth of life? That we are all one. That's a big one. There's only one of us, really. Okay, but when you start defining yourself as separate, as an individual, as a personal self, then the loneliness, the fear, and everything will escalate. You see, and it is in that we suffer the most. That becomes a life-threatening situation. Another thing that is beautiful about getting to know awareness and employing awareness into everything that happens in your life, the moment you allow that to happen, you begin to see that your nature is awareness. Wow. Now, what if you realize the benefits of pure awareness? I am awareness. You know what that means? I never had a beginning. It means I will never die. It means that I am already perfect as I really am in my awareness. It means that I am not bound by time, because in reality, there is no time in awareness. Awareness just is. So when we go out of the body, and I've done it twice in my life, I didn't expect to experience time at all. There was no time. Everything was happening at once. Everything happens at once. There is no beginning, middle, or end. See, but in the world, we have the
illusion of time.
The illusion of time, and that also creates most of the fears and problems. You see,
interesting, because with the example what we just talked about thought, we have the thought. Say, for instance, I have a pain in my knee, and I have a thought, and I say it's persistent. It's going to get worse. I'm actually projecting that thought into the future. I'm actually creating a fearful future for myself, which solidifies me as a separate individual. There's still a Suzy whose knee is going to get worse in the future. But if I just recognize it as a thought and let it go, then before I know it, I have no awareness of any pain in my leg.
Yes,
the moment there's no awareness of it, I'm free.
That's right. This is so interesting. I'll tell you why. Remember, I exercise with weights, with 5-pound dumbbells and stuff like this. But what happens, I developed a pain in my shoulder here, left shoulder, and it's been nagging me for quite a while. And so sometimes I say to give me an aspirin, and it was okay. But you said to me, but Burt, this is also in your mind. I didn't disagree with you, but today I didn't want to take an aspirin. And I thought, well, I'll go find what I have to do right now. And now I forgot about it. And it's no longer bothering me.
That's right. Now you're at peace.
No, I'm at peace about it. Yeah.
The Course says to heal is to make happy. So the moment you take away, because the sickness is really a projection into the future, that we think something's going to happen. We're going to die. We're going to lose our body. We're going to lose something. But the moment we see it's a thought, in the sense of this, it's gone. Then and catching the fact that it's not persistent. It's not 24 hours a day. It comes and it goes. It goes away. And so the Course says to heal is to make happy, because it's instantaneous peace. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's another thing to be considered here, because when we talk about thought, we are really looking at something that is gigantic. Everything is a thought. Look around you. The whole world is a thought. Your body is a thought. See? I didn't know that until one day I was out of the body. I had an experience, ND experience, and I was the happiest I've ever been in my life. Not to go into this, but it was grandest experience I've had. I was 17 at the time, and yet I could see color. I could feel music. I could relate. There was no feeling of being alone. There were no people around at that particular point, but I didn't feel alone at all. I feel, so beautiful. I wanted it to continue. So this is it, that the laws of perfection are already in us, but they're not found in the body.
Mhm.
They're not found in the world, in other words. Okay. So anything that we make into an object becomes itself a hindrance.
Right. It's a shadow of the whole.
It's
in
a
sense.
shadow of the whole. That doesn't mean we ignore it. We still need to take care of it and
Mhm.
exercise and eat okay.
Mhm.
But the point is that if we make it very real, it will own us. And that's why people are so old so early. Some people are old at 65, 70. I mean, that is absurd. But why do they get that way? Because they believe, well, you're supposed to be old at 70, you see?
Mhm.
Like the age span, what was it given? It was 72, right?
Is the
For men.
something like that? 76 for men and
76.
80 for women right now in
Was
North
it-
America, I think.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they said it's going down
You
slightly.
see, now if you start believing that, you're already caught. You see, and all these and all these things. So another thing that is interesting too, which I wasn't quite sure before, I used to be in bodybuilding, and I had a very good physique. As a matter of fact, I was Mr. Canada, Mr. Eastern Canada, 1957.
That was before I was born.
Right. Anyway, and I always loved bodybuilding, doing gymnastics, everything else, until the spirituality came into my life. But now I'm starting again with very light weights, but still somehow or other, my isn't that true?
Yeah, your physique and your posture
Yeah,
are looking younger.
I put on
Yeah.
weight and I put on muscle too.
Mhm.
And despite now, you see, they say, well, you reach a certain age, you don't build muscle anymore. That's not true.
Nothing's
See,
true. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we touched upon this last week in a sense. We talked about the nature of thought, right? Back to kind of guilt again. The nature of thought in this world that we live in seems to be judgment, guilt, grievances. Like, for instance, the number one story right now in the United States is this case where a policeman killed somebody he arrested in front of other people, and it's big in the news, and people like to push. So guilt is a popular topic. I mean, it gets our attention. They said
That's right.
that when O.J. Simpson was on trial, people were upset that he wasn't found guilty. So the nature of separation is guilt, but that's not bad news. It's only because we made a mistake, because we thought it was possible to be separate, and it's not possible to be separate in the first place. So getting back to your bodybuilding, as you recognize more and more that you're this oneness, you're this awareness, you're the son of God, or the connection to God, or emptiness, now true thoughts start to bleed through. These thoughts of happiness, of everlasting life, and they can become reflected in your mood and your mentality and your experience. So it's beautiful.
That's
really.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And now when we talk about that, people might think, well, the Burt and Suzy, they're lucky because they don't. No. We're not lucky because we know this. As a matter of fact, that's why we're trying to share it. See, another thing that I believe in very much, and I believe that it's here for the fifth dimension, which we are on. The Course in Miracles is the book to actually follow. And in it, now there's another thing about the book, Course in Miracles. It doesn't concentrate on the body at all.
No,
It doesn't consider the body at
it's
all.
spirit.
It doesn't talk
spirit.
about sex. It doesn't talk about anything at all about the body.
Nothing worldly.
Because no, nothing worldly, but it's neutral.
It's
to the
neutral.
Course. Yeah.
It talks about your mind.
But
really.
the Course talks about the mind. That's right, and the spirit.
And the spirit that you really are.
Right. And when you follow it, it's so beautiful. It really is. And it's very, very simplified. So one of the things that we're discussing now is that the Course says that whenever you are not following the truth, when you're not following, truth, okay, you feel guilt automatically.
Right. Identification,
So,
the ego.
identification with guilt. But you don't know where that guilt is coming from. See, I just don't feel good. I just don't feel good about myself. There's something lacking. There's something not clear. You see? But the Course in Miracles makes it very clear. You see? And it's because you have identified your thoughts as real. And the moment you make your thoughts real, you're already stifled your life.
Mhm.
You know, doctors just a few years ago, they didn't, all of them did not believe that there's a life after death. Now, many of them are experiencing that they can bring someone back to life and revive the heart. You see,
Mhm.
like people who have been dead for several
Mhm.
hours. One time there was a man brought up from the morgue too, you know.
After 3 days.
After 3 days, there was a doctor, Ibn Alexander
Mhm.
too. He was in a coma for 10 days. There was another doctor too.
Bruce Grayson. Bruce Grayson is the head of IANS. He I don't know if he was in a coma, but he experienced. Oh no, it was a patient that he experienced
Yes,
it with.
that's right. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right
yeah.
away.
That was
Yeah.
a patient. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so
Mhm.
now they're beginning to learn that there's no such thing as death.
Mhm.
You see, and it's true because when I experienced my out of body with the second one at the hospital,
Mhm.
all of a sudden I was in the gurney, and all of a sudden I was out.
Mhm.
You know, and I
Mhm.
experienced the light. And but it happened in such a way that all of a sudden my body was a mess. I was very, very sick. I had a very high fever and all that, as far as the body was concerned. But then I went into another state, completely different. And in that state, I believe I was dead. You see, but I'm not quite sure about the dynamics of what had happened. Maybe for a few seconds, my heart had stopped. But the point is that there was a moment when I felt so good. I felt one with everyone. And I felt the light was my home. And this is where I wanted to be.
Mhm. Sounds beautiful.
Yeah, sounds very, very beautiful. But that's already our state now.
That's our natural state.
Yes. And incidentally, those of you who are interested in what I'm talking about, there's an international association. Yeah, it's called IANDS, IANDES.
IANDE. It's the
DE.
International Association for Near-Death Studies. Oh, yes.
Studies.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's been going on for a while, and so far they've been more than 10, 11 million people who have experienced their true nature through, you know, heart attacks, so-called death, and things like that.
And they're amazing too, because they're often their description of the light and the sense of oneness matches certain passages that are in the Course in Miracles.
That's right.
Of course, I'd say quite a few people have take up Course after they come back.
Yes.
And in fact, there was this one gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he said that was what he was told during his NDE was to come back and to study A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
Do you know the name?
I don't remember his name, but he's from India. But it's interesting too, though, because in the Course, the 4 obstacles to peace, I think the first one is the attraction to guilt. The third one is the fear of death or the attraction to death. So and because we all have one mind, we're all in this together.
We're
so as more and
mind.
more people are showing us that death isn't real, that we're creating, we're associating or relating to our body less, where we're no longer identifying with our body. We're starting to identify as spirit. So we're starting to take a breather with regard to death. So it's amazing. It's part of the 5th dimension, as you described.
Yes. So can you imagine, now we're in the 5th dimension. In a few years from now, maybe another 100, 200 years, we'll be living in such a way that even talking like this is infantile, you know. That's how we'll become so aware of our true nature. But anyway, one thing that I want to emphasize in this particular lesson more than anything, because it means a lot to me, for people to listen, always know the difference between thought and awareness. Do not ever, ever confuse them. Awareness is eternal. Awareness knows no time. Awareness has no beginning or end. It just is always. And it is what joins us all together. Thought is very personal. Thought is what you make real in your life. A thought comes to you and you believe it. The moment you believe it, you have become subject to it. You become a victim, actually, to it. You see? Now you might say, where does the thought come from? It doesn't come from you necessarily. It comes from your environment. It comes from people around you. It comes from many, many areas. The point is that the moment you make it real, you become it. So the point I'm trying to make is when you become aware, and incidentally, awareness is also called presence, you know?
Is that the same as God is?
It's the same as God is, really. God is, yeah, yeah. Presence, how do we, it's been discussed often lately because people get mixed up when it says talk awareness. All thoughts come from awareness. Now, that doesn't mean they come from awareness itself. Awareness makes you aware that you are thinking. That's what is meant by awareness. The moment you're aware that you're thinking and you identify with the thought, then awareness takes a back seat, which is your presence.
Unless you're aware that you're aware, in which case you've got a little foot in the doorway of freedom.
Right. But if you're aware that the thought just came from awareness, it has no reality of its own, you're aware of awareness itself, that becomes a heightening of your awareness, of your presence. And that's how we gain power, we gain strength, we gain realization. See?
So catching this is forgiveness itself.
Beautiful. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes. Now, people might ask, well, if I'm caught in thoughts most of the time and I'm suffering, you know, when a person is suffering, 99% of the time is because of their mind. But if this is happening, how do I deal with it? Well, be aware that it's a thought. If you become aware that it's just a thought, and you begin to see it for what it is, you begin to gain a strength and a healing power you never thought was possible. Many times, and we have a program called It's a Miracle.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
It's from the early 2000s.
Yeah. There are hundreds of cases. Anyway, but the miracle of healing. See, doctors might not be able to heal a person. All of a sudden, a person prays for you, and that very prayer itself becomes a link to the awareness, and the energy it lifts you up and brings a healing. So there's a lot that most of us, regarding our science and our medicine and our psychology, put a limit to these things. That they are limited, actually, you know. And by seeing that the truth is beyond anything that we think is mental, we are absolutely above the laws of limitation. The truth. I'm making myself clear here.
So the thoughts that are true thoughts, or the thoughts of God, as the Course calls them, are actually such as love and peace and innocence, and eternal life and joy. Those are more feelings than thought.
Those are feelings. Actually, they are the being itself.
They're the being itself.
They're the being itself.
So I have a quote from the Course. So here where it says, your mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. So illusions are when we identify with these ego thoughts, which are not maybe ours, or like you say, they come from the environment, because we're really one mind. And then it goes on to say, I said before that you must learn to think with God. To think with him is to think like him. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. And guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. So that's beautiful. It describes exactly what you were saying. So the negative feeling is from believing our thoughts.
That's right.
As Byron Katie says, all your problems come from thinking and believing your thoughts.
Right. And the more you believe your thoughts, the stronger they become, because they start affecting you. They affect you in a physical way, in a mental way, in so many, many ways. And then you begin to believe that it's real. The moment you believe a thought is real, then the thought to you is real, but it's still a thought. When you know better, then a healing happens.
Did you say something, Wade?
Yeah, Burt or Suzy, I think you may have touched on this, but I'm still hoping to get your clarification on this between awareness and thoughts.
Yes.
I find it's easy when we are in stillness that we can achieve awareness without thoughts. However, when we're in action, when we're in motion, we're motivated to do something, have to do, or we not even that our ego drives us to do, but whenever we do anything, uh, if there are thoughts, then is it necessary? Is it always the case that thoughts will cloud your awareness, or is there any thoughts that are or positive that is a direct product of your awareness, or if I can see that, or how
No,
do I think
that's a very
imagine?
intelligent question, incidentally. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now, when we say all thoughts are thoughts, we're saying that are all based on the mind and therefore have no real when it comes to the spirit. Okay, when it comes to spirit, thought itself is minimal. However, since we have a body and the body is made up of thought, now very few people are aware of that. The mind is actually made up of thought, all of it. So we can actually use that mind power to engage it. For example, there are people that break records, pole vaulting, running. My goodness, everything's like almost superhuman.
Mhm.
Now, how was that done? By thought, believe it or not. I begin to believe in such a way that the body adjusts to that reality. Because you see, thought creates our reality. I look at a room and see our place, you know, and so everything that I see is all made up of thought. Everything is made up of thought. See, well, the moment you begin to see that, then it takes and now in check. What is the word? Takes into account that I can use thought to actually achieve a particular goal. Yes, you can. Even though it's not real, you can make it real. See, I used to be a great high jumper, and I used to love high jumping, but it was done not with the pole vaulting. It was just you run, then you go from the side, whoops, when you go into a right. Anyway, soft surface sand. Um, and I was really good at it. I was so good at it. I used to imagine in my mind that I'm actually throwing. So before I take a run, I used to imagine myself, see myself actually throwing, go through that. It was to be over 6 feet, and I used to throw over it. I said, well, one day the guy that was managing us, all of us, um, people asked him, he says, Burt is winning on your team. It's doing great, jumping. And so he came and told me, and the manager said, who was managing our group, he said, Burt, what is your secret? Well, at that time, I wasn't thinking like I think now. Right now I'm more aware of the mind than I was then. So then I thought, well, I imagine myself going through the pole vaulting. So he said, oh, that's it? You actually visualize it? I said, yes, and I believe it. And then came the competition. And I swear this is the truth. Came the competition. And I couldn't make the 6'5" jump to win. Because when I tried to visualize, there was always a thought intervening. Oh, maybe I won't make it this time. Maybe it's not. I couldn't. It was all in my mind, and I failed. And I failed because he said to me, "What is your secret?" There was no secret. I used to. In my mind, I was very clear that I'm going to make it. I had no doubt at all. I just go, ooh, so beautiful. But the moment I told him, quote, the secret, I began to doubt whether that was it. I'm not sure. And in my mind, I kept saying.
So thought came to interrupt.
The thought to interrupt, yeah. and I could not make the jump. So yes, yes, you asked a very good question there. Through the mind, we can control matter. We can control the body, definitely. As a matter of fact, I've seen it. I've never done it myself, but I've seen it. There were a few people, devotees, from India, and they believed in Ramana Maharshi, and they invited me to the show, and they were walking on hot coals. Now, these coals, you know what a coal is, right?
Uh-huh.
It's heated
It's
coal.
an ember.
Remember, it's
Yeah.
red. It
Yeah,
was
it's
red,
fire.
so hot.
Yeah. Mhm.
When you come close to it, it singes my eyebrow, my beard. That's why it's hot. These guys, and I swear this is the truth, I saw them. These guys would go barefoot and walk on these hot coals. But as they walk, they chant. They chant, and they're totally in love with God, and they have this incredible concentration, and they transcend the body. I look at their feet, and they're nothing but dirty, but they're not burned at all. Yeah. So that was one of the things that made me see the power of mind over thought. And thank you for asking it again. I might not have thought of using it. Yes, the thoughts of the mind are not real, but they could have an advantage if you believe of some power through them.
Right. So, like the Holy Spirit.
Yes, like the Holy Spirit.
Like in the case where you wrote that book, it woke you up in the middle of the night and said, "Go sit at the computer."
That's right.
So that thought was an inspired thought. So it wasn't a guilt-based thought. It wasn't like, "Oh, my arm's going to hurt all day," or today's such a burden, or the weather's lousy. It wasn't a negative thought. It was simply a neutral thought. It was
another power.
Yeah, another power completely.
Another power completely. I don't know exactly whether it was the Holy Spirit or there was some other energy or maybe a guide that guided me. But what I can tell you for sure is that it got me out of bed, and I seemed to have no choice at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I started writing 4 unknown facts of reality. And it said that this might not be very popular because it's about emptiness. But yet at the same time, it is very, very, very true. The first one, everything is empty. You can call it God, but if you call it God, people turn it to a religion. You see, so call it emptiness. And then number 2, unknown fact, emptiness itself is the greatest human fear. Fear of death, for example, is a fear of being no more.
It's very interesting because I hadn't thought of this before. So the second reality is that all fear is the fear of emptiness.
That's
in a
right.
sense, these negative thoughts that come into play about our guilt are actually keeping us away from that fear, aren't they? It's actually
what do you mean,
our guilt thoughts, our thoughts are keeping us from this emptiness. My whole day, I'm going to be burdened with my day. I have tons of work to do. My day is burdened. So rather than being in this emptiness,
the fear would come from the emptiness. I don't want to live in emptiness.
Right.
And the moment you say that, you defeat yourself.
Right. And that is what's triggering these
and
negative.
That's what triggers that guilt.
These negative.
Right, because no matter what you do, if you believe that this thing is keeping you from being the total person that you can be, then it will keep you. You see, so this is where it is so immensely important that what you believe about yourself is a little higher capacity. So thought is very, very powerful. It is never real, but it can accomplish feats that are considered miraculous. Because again, the power of thought is what created the body in the first place. It's what created the world. This is it, the power of thought. Can you imagine that? So anything that you believe is possible, that very belief itself makes it possible. So nothing is real. So we can say this. Anything that is thought is not real, but it can make it seem so real that it defies explanation.
Right. So if we're feeling negative, then that means we've been listening to these negative guilt-based thoughts.
That's right.
And if we're at peace or joy, It means we're now a conduit for these positive life, for instance, channeling beautiful music. So it's still an illusion because this music still occurs in the illusory world, but now it's coming from God or coming from emptiness.
Anything that comes from God comes through awareness. Just like a beautiful piece of music. It's a very enchanting, very uplifting. Okay. But one case that just came to mind, and it's not long ago, really. There was a woman and whose son was caught under a truck. And this truck was quite large, you know, weighs a few tons. And she was just a frail little mother, you know, was maybe just
my size.
just your size, right? She went in desperation because her son was caught under this car, and she lifted it. She never thought whether she could or not.
She just had to do it.
In desperation to save her son, she lifted it up.
So that's the power of love.
And that's the power of love.
Wow.
You see? So takes to our friend here. You know, what's his name again? Wei. Yeah, the power of mind is incredible, especially when it's positive. So you can use it in a very positive way. The strength, power, belief, accomplishment, etc. So, but if you believe some destructive about yourself, then also can be horrendously awful. But it's never real.
Bert, are you saying?
I can't hear you.
Are you suggesting that some thoughts are deployed by spirit when you have a strong spirit of seeing something becoming a reality, then you can achieve it. But also some thoughts are maybe driven by ego, that person, you know, you just your mind, your ego.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
I can say what he said. Here's what he said. Are you saying that some thoughts are inspired and come from spirit, while other thoughts are authored by ego?
No. All thoughts come from the thought box, from thought. You see, the world itself is thought. Everything is thought. Everything that you see, feel, touch, hear is thought. And it actually congealed and became what it came. The body itself is thought. Everything is thought. So it can create for and against. Like
but he said, is it not inspired by spirit? For instance, when Helen Schuckman heard the words in her head as thought, this is A Course in Miracles, please take notes. That was divine inspired thought.
That was a divine inspired thought, yes.
So that
the inspired thought is, again, it's still not real on a
right. It's not awareness.
basis.
It still occurs in the perceptual dream.
It's
right?
still in the perceptual dream.
So it's not.
But to her, it was a miracle.
Right.
It gave her capacity. So you can capture a certain thought, but you cannot convey it to somebody else. Well, think like this, and it will happen to you. You see, because you cannot make people see what you see. But it is that seeing that is miraculous. And the mind is extremely powerful. Yeah. But when you combine the power of thought with the power of awareness, you see the difference between the two.
Yes.
Awareness is always there. It never begins, never passes away. Thought comes and goes. If you make that thought powerful enough, then it's okay. Okay, now how can you tell? Because it makes you feel good. Can thought make you feel good? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, definitely. So think of all the people who take drugs or drink just to get drunk, and they feel good when they were drunk. But the problem is that they don't see that the overtaking of that particular drink will endanger their health because it's going out of balance. So this is where common sense comes in. The power of mind is immense, but the thought itself is just a thought. It is not spirit. Spirit. Now, what makes it real and not real? What makes it real only as far as the physical world is concerned. Thought can be powerful as far as the physical world is concerned. If you believe you're going to get $1 million and you're totally convinced In one way or another, you'll be able to make it. You see, the power of conviction can give you the power. in But the greatest power, which never makes a mistake, because if you want $1,000,000 and you believe it completely, that belief can make it happen. But then it can also make it happen to lose it all at the same time. See, because there are so many factors involved in thought. If, however, spirit never makes a mistake. Whatever you get from spirit is always perfect, always perfection. Yeah. And it's always what you need. So if you want $1,000,000 so that you can be powerful and good, but you might not get the happiness and peace that you're really looking for. You see? However, if you want peace more than anything, then that peace will give you everything, even money, and you won't lose it. Because the principle of spirit is that it is our true nature. Spirit is our true nature. The mind is not our true nature. The mind is the source from which we create. And
so we use the mind essentially to choose between the body or the separate being or the spirit, which is also the awareness.
No, there's another thing too, which is very important. And I've experienced it too, is that when I was out of the body in the spirit world, I still had a capacity of the mind to think. But I didn't think, but there was no negativity. There was no ability to hate or revenge or anything of that nature. But thoughts were still there.
So they were neutral.
They were neutral. They were neutral.
So they just appeared.
They appeared. Yeah. So
were they there at the time, or when you came back, were they remembered as thoughts, but maybe were simply pure awareness at the time?
No, they were
thoughts.
They were thoughts. Yeah. Because when you get out of the body, you're so clear, so immensely clear. And when you get back into the body, you forget all the laws of life that at that time came all complete in you. But there are certain things you don't forget. You don't forget that it was more real than the world itself. You don't forget that how you felt, you never felt like that before. You see? So also thought in the spirit world can never be negative because it has no duality.
Because it's thoughts of God, essentially.
Because it's thought of God, right?
So it's like it's knowledge almost.
So we can say that the mind of God, the Course in Miracles makes the mind into two parts: the real mind and the not so real mind.
Yeah, the right mind and the wrong mind.
That's right.
The wrong mind is the ego. The right mind is the Holy Spirit.
Right. Yeah.
But both of those are an illusion within consciousness.
Well, that's right. Yeah. So when we're out of the body, we still think. You see, we still carry all that, but there was no negativity in it. There is no separation. There is no anything limiting. In other words, yeah.
This experience you had when you left the body, and you had 2 or 3 of them. Two of them. Okay, that's our natural state, and this guilt-driven universe or world we have was projected out by this mind of it because it felt that it betrayed the parent, the father, this awareness, God, whatever you want to call it. And so all of this guilt is going. So we can recognize that this is happening, but in reality, it never happened. No. So there's no reason. We're all innocent. There's no reason for guilt.
That is so good.
So, but you have to see the guilt. You have to see the truth of the guilt. So you think you're guilty because you had a fight with your mother.
Anything that happened on a mental state, you even see it. You can still see it in your mind, but at the same time, you know that it's not real.
Okay.
You somehow transcend it. What is real in the spirit world is simply purely spirit. Yeah.
So the guilt we think we have for having a fight with our mother isn't the case. We're actually feeling guilty for this identification as separate from the whole.
That's right.
But it's not possible to be separate from the whole. So that's the healing. That's the healing. And the more we look at
the thought of separation is itself one of our greatest misfortunes, suffering. You see, but at the same time, it's impossible to be separate.
Right.
You know.
And that's what we're learning.
And that's what we're learning all the time. you know,
And we're one mind,
like
so we're learning together, and that's
we're,
that's the fifth dimension you talk about. So
that
it's not a solo journey.
it is the fifth dimension now where people are beginning to understand they are all one family. Now, there are many countries still in the fourth dimension and even in the third dimension. So in the the worlds that are in the third dimension, they're still having wars. They're still fighting and killing each other. They don't know any better
Mhm.
because that's the mentality of the third dimension. But in the fifth dimension, which we are in, it's called the spiritual dimension. Okay, when we see the possibilities of spirit, and and the possibilities are endless. We are all meant to eventually um, go to heaven as our place. Now, heaven doesn't mean it's a particular place. Heaven itself is a state of consciousness, not a state of consciousness,
Awareness.
a case of awareness that is so perfect that we are at our best. We are the happiest.
Mhm.
See, yeah,
That's the emptiness. As
that's
well.
the emptiness, right?
And it's
Yeah.
pure unconditional love.
And it's pure unconditional love. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So anybody asking any
We
questions?
have a few, yes, a few questions. I'll bring Keel first. Keel Mantia, you have a
Can you
question
tell
to
me what
ask?
you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Wade,
I
just we
do.
can't hear you very well, Wade.
Go
Can you
ahead.
turn your microphone up a little?
Okay,
Wade's introducing
go
you
ahead,
now.
Keel.
Yeah. So, so I understand the difference between thought and awareness. But what happens when you have, let's say for my example, like what if I have like an ego that identify with thoughts and then I separate and I forget that I'm one with everything, that I'm one awareness. How do I kind of like dismantle the ego? How do I avoid that trap of, falling for the thoughts?
Very good. Yeah. First of all, you by making yourself more aware, um, when thoughts come, and this is how you start. When thoughts come, that they disturb your momentum, they disturb your peace. Somehow you don't feel too good. You know very well that it's a negative one. You see, and then you learn to forgive it. Now, by forgiving means that you tell yourself that you're not going to accept this as a fact. You say, "I forgive you," because you're not going to take a possession on me, so to speak, and you let it go because you know it's just a thought. If, however, you begin to believe a particular thought, somehow you give it reality, the moment you give it a reality, it manifests as true to you. So it's very important. If anything makes you feel uncomfortable, anything makes you feel unhappy, anything that brings you against someone else, which defies your ability to love, anything that brings that contrast, you forgive it. But you don't forgive it by hating yourself. You see, the point is to keep loving yourself no matter what is happening. You say that I made a mistake. You see, I because the moment you separate from another human being, you begin to judge them. You begin to think there's something wrong, and you want to avoid them. And before you know it, you're living in hell. And this is how all the diseases of mankind happen through this separation. So therefore, always love yourself no matter how you are thinking and say, I mean well, I want to love, I want to feel good, you know. And so, but when something that separates me from that feeling of goodness, from the feeling of, then I catch it and I let it go. Now, it's not easy to let it go right away if you believe it to be real. However, if you insist that only good is real, bad is not real. It's a hard one to understand on earth because we think bad and good go together. But in truth, goodness is our true nature because love is our true nature. So the moment you emphasize that, every time you emphasize it, it gains greater and greater hold on you. And so that if something happens that is not good, you let it go. And when you let it go, you begin to feel more powerful, more uh, better. Yeah, I don't know, but did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. There's also a question from Marie. If you're ready, you can feel free to go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. Question is with regards to people. So I completely understand what you're saying, and I apply it to myself all the time. And talking to my daughter about this, and she asked me a question that reminded me of something I'm learning from the Buddha, which is to feel the emotions in your body. So she was telling me, even if it's unreal, even if it's a thought, it feels because like her or someone who's believes something that's painful, they are feeling that energy in their body. So to
That's right.
say
Yes,
it's almost
yes.
like insulting them.
We make anything real that we believe is real.
So to suffering because you made that up and it's an illusion, it's like insulting them. So how to help someone who believes because they're feeling this terrifying, like just
Yes,
tell
it
them
is.
feel the
Well,
energy.
first of all, love is the strongest, most powerful thing that we have. If it's your daughter or friend, bring that feeling of love and see them in your mind that it's only their belief that is causing this. You see, when you see someone, but you don't see them as sick, you don't see them as bad, you see them as not understanding at this point, and you really want to help them through your love, that becomes healing itself. That's how powerful it is. There have been many cases over and over and over, and I studied so many in IANs, people dying of cancer, heart failure, dying from a broken heart, etc., etc. And then someone who loved them and cared and prayed for them. It's amazing. All of a sudden, a miracle happened. And miracles do happen. That's why I call it the Course in Miracles. Miracles do happen. Many miracles have happened in my life too. And and us between us. So what I'm saying here is that when you love someone and they are suffering, don't go along with their belief and limitations. See them as already healing. See them in your mind, feeling better, feeling happier, etc., etc. Touch them with your hand, on their shoulder.
And not say anything to them. Don't tell them that they're in, don't say anything, just think of it.
Just think it as already real. Think the best that you can and transmit that energy even through your touch, through your eyes too. And it really helps. It's amazing. I have a system called zapping, and I use it when I find people are being unhappy or very nervous or don't know what to say. So this word zapping is I picture them in my mind as able to deal with their nervousness. And then in my mind, I say, I love you. You're part of me. And then I look in my eyes, I look at their eye, you know, and I say, oh, you're wonderful. This is great. And the moment I start acting and I zap them, all of a sudden things begin to change. They begin to feel better, they begin to act better, but more importantly, they're actually healing. Does that help?
Yeah,
That's
she gave a
great.
thumbs up, honey.
I
Oh,
guess
oh,
we're
good.
not. That's good. I guess we're not blindly on this false reality, believing something hope come true and it will never come true. Rather, we would shift our consciousness and also get to the awareness and express everything through love and unconditional love.
Yes.
We get to 5 o'clock now, and does anyone have final question? By the way, Tabby Ali mentioned in the chat box that who's loving whom? If we are love,
We are love.
then how can one love self?
See, when you love someone and they love you back, that's love. Love is not something. Love is the recognition, the knowing inside that we are all made by God, so to speak. You see? God is love itself, the oneness, the totality, the wholeness. We're all brothers and sisters, one family, really. And so when you love another and they love you back, you are in that field of love. And that field of love is very healing.
So that love is like a recognition of the oneness. It's love
It's
loving itself.
It's recognition of the oneness.
So it's one little spark
yeah.
in the totality where it's eventually every seeming separate thing loving itself or recognizing itself, at which point
that's beautiful.
It's pure emptiness.
That's right, pure emptiness. Yeah. You know, you can do this. Love is so perfect. You can do a test. If you love flowers or you have plants and you take them to your home, and if they are a little bit, they need some growth, talk to them. And they say, I love you. I love you. I mean it to the plant. Caress it. And you'll find that the plant grows healthier. And this has been proven many times. So everything caters to love, everything, you know. Anyway, so we can call
That's great. Thank you, Burt.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Look forward to
thank you,
seeing
Burt, for
again.
your